In fact, it'll get to the point, hopefully, like myself, where you can leave the day job, drop all of that, standard that the monthly income that you have from your full-time job, and now the properties are actually cash flowing enough to justify getting a mortgage based on that cash flow.
Hey investors, Bradley here from Watson Estates, and you're listening to the largest, fastest growing podcast for Toronto real estate on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Friends, thank you for joining us. Please subscribe if you have not. Leave us a comment down below and support the channel as you can. And today I'm excited because we like to do our morning updates, keep you in the loop with everything going on in the local market. But why not talk to people who are successfully invested in and around our marketplace? Today, we're talking to Kellan James from London, Ontario. At the age of 26, he bought his first duplex, and through a series of BRRRR strategies with no joint ventures, I repeat, no joint ventures, has built his personal portfolio to over 50 units. And today we're going to ask him how he did it. He's going to share some golden nuggets. If you guys are looking to take the knowledge you're learning from our show and apply it in a way where you can be extremely successful in our local real estate market, this is a show you're not going to want to miss. Make sure you hit that like button and enjoy the show. Hey, Kellan, thanks for joining us on the show. How you doing?
Good. How about yourself?
I'm doing great, and I can't wait to I always love the guests because we talk about the news on an ongoing basis. We've got very savvy investors that listen to our show. But what would this all be for if not to create wealth in real estate? So I love having someone who's a doer in the real estate business. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself for our audience. What makes you, Kellan, unique?
Yeah, so I started off investing in 2016, and I basically started by buying a duplex, lived in half of it, and I lived for free. I was working my full-time day job, and I knew I wanted financial independence for myself. So my original goal was actually like the 4% safe withdrawal rate, right? Like index funds, save up $1 million, live off 40 grand, live frugally. And then I was like, you know what? If I live in one half of a duplex, I could live for cheap. So I did that. And then I started seeing like, hey, look, I could buy standalone investment properties and they can cash flow a lot better than what I could do by just saving. So I ended up actually diving in pretty deep into the BRRRR investing strategy, listened to like all of the Bigger Pockets podcasts at the time. And I ended up, founding a local meetup group, getting connected with local investors, and I ended up, diving in pretty deep, doing like a whole bunch of BRRRR investment strategy properties. And in 2.5 years, I ended up getting 32 units, and I left the day job and retired at age 29, and now kind of focused on investing in real estate full time. I'm up to 52 units at this point, and hoping to kind of focus on 6+ unit buildings at this point, hopefully larger if I can get into some apartment buildings.
Beautiful, beautiful. So what's your background, like your history pre-investing? Like where did you come from?
Yeah, so I grew up in Northern Ontario. I went to school there and did computer science for like a 4-year bachelor of computer science degree, and that's when shortly after that I moved to London, Ontario, and started just working and saving and living frugally and that kind of thing. But while I was doing that, I was actually working on a master's degree part-time because my work paid for it, and I thought may as well. And so I kind of got that started, doing that on the side while working, and then also working part-time jobs and on the side of my full-time job, just try and save as much as I could and get ahead. And yeah, I mean, I after a while, I really lost the passion for, especially when I got into real estate, I really lost the passion for the tech world. It just isn't really for me anymore. But I was still doing a master's degree part-time, and yeah, that was kind of a big thing for me. It was like that debate in my head as to whether I should keep that going, because after a while it took the opportunity cost of my time just wasn't there anymore. It wasn't actually until recently that I decided, it was like maybe a couple of years ago or something like that I decided I was literally one course away from completing the master's degree. After it was like 5 years of part-time, I was one course away, and I was like, you know what? I'm really bad at quitting things. And that can be a really great thing, persistence in a lot of things. But when there's something that's not serving you anymore, like this, I had no intentions of pursuing a career anymore in the tech world. So I didn't really see the value in it anymore. And I decided I'm going to use this as an opportunity to learn how to quit things. And it was a big decision. And I ended up sending that email saying, you know what, I'm dropping out. I had straight A's, like all that, but it wasn't serving me. So one course away from the master's degree, and I decided to just, you know what, I'm just gonna keep doing the real estate thing.
You burn the ships.
Yeah. It was it was a big decision. I'm really not good at quitting things. That's a huge challenge of mine.
Yeah.
I remember there was a podcast a long time ago. Freakonomics did a podcast called, or it was about quitting. Whole episode was about quitting, and I was fascinated by the topic, and I didn't know why. And it took me years to, get more into financial independence and all this stuff that could bring. But I loved the concept of quitting, and they always like joked around that like a winner never quits and a quitter never wins, and that's like this thing that's ingrained in our heads. But I think it's so important to recognize the things that aren't serving you anymore and quit them and start focusing your time on things that are more valuable to you. I love that it came back full circle to that, like on me like that.
Sweet. Awesome. So tell us today. So you've made you quit strategically, and you went all the way in here. Now you said you've got 52 or over 50 properties. Tell us a little bit about like, what does that allow you to do? Like, what does that return look like for you? Cash flow, equity. And my understanding is you do a lot of these on your own, not through joint venture partnerships. So maybe tell us what that result actually is and why you can be so confident in what you're doing.
Yeah, I think like the joint venture thing is the thing that a lot of people really dive into early. And I think that, if you have a decent income from your day job or from your self-employment or whatever it may be, you can continue buying properties yourself as long as the properties are solid, like you can do solid refinances from them, right? If they're actual good BRRRRs, then you can pull that money out and keep going. So if you're that confident that you're able to do a BRRRR like that, then why not do it with your own money, and why not end up with 100% equity after? So that was my philosophy, and I built my portfolio of 52 units without joint venture partners. And I mean, because of that, cash flow really starts to add up. My goal was always for each property to make at least $1,000 a month. So I have 14 buildings, it's 52 units. And at this point, I'm somewhere around like 17 and a half grand a month in cash flow. And then another probably 7 or so in mortgage pay down. This stuff really starts to add up. Like I live a pretty frugal lifestyle. And I think that, I could have maybe scaled to 100 units and with joint venture partners, but that would have been twice as much work realistically, or close to twice as much work. And I would end up with a very similar amount of cash flow. So I really think that there's a lot of value in doing things yourself if you can. Not to say that there isn't a place for joint venture partners. If you're getting into large apartment buildings, or if you're, just starting out, you don't have day job income, like there's plenty of reasons why, and people you can learn from, things like that. There's plenty of reasons to partner, but it's my favorite way to go. And it's fun because people that kind of float toward me end up having a similar strategy in their head. Although there are people that I recommend joint venturing to when it makes sense for them.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys are your own breed, I'll tell you, the no JV people.
I don't know.
Fascinating. Like you talk about this idea of financing, right? And I know that this idea of the roadblocks, what kind of limitations are people maybe overreading into? Because clearly you've been able to expand at a rate. A lot of people would think, how are you going to get financing if it's just yourself? What does that look like? How have you been able to structure it to make that work?
Yeah, so it's funny because it seems like it's just this comment people throw out all the time. Oh, once you hit the 5 property limit, or once you hit the 10 property limit, that limit doesn't exist. I have no idea why I know why people throw it out there, but it's wrong. You can easily get past these limits. The properties have to cash flow. I mean, if the properties don't cash flow, then the bank's going to look at your debt service ratios and they're going to say, look, you're tapped out. But if the properties actually cash flow well, those properties are going to float themselves and your debt service ratios are going to stay just fine. In fact, it'll get to the point, hopefully, like myself, where you can leave the day job, drop all of that, the monthly income that you have from your full-time job. And now the properties are actually cash flowing enough to justify getting a mortgage based on that cash flow. So that's the stage that I've reached. I'm 14 buildings and going, and I'm now working with local credit unions. For the first 10 properties, Scotiabank, some of these local lenders, that kind of stuff, are like the A lenders. And now, local credit unions are actually a really great option for continuing to purchase properties without the T4 9 to 5 income.
Yeah. So with the right property, you can make it work, and they can feed themselves, even in the residential space. Interesting.
Yes, exactly. Even in the 2 to 4 unit building space. So I think a lot of people also think, well, now you have to go to large, commercial large multifamily, because commercial lenders look at the building and not your income and that kind of stuff. There's plenty of myths in that space as well. As we know, they do want to see that you know what you're doing. It's not just hey, I'm Joe Blow, I've never owned a property before, I want to buy an apartment building. They're not like, they want to see that you have experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can absolutely work with local credit unions and still buy 2 to 4 unit buildings, and do it without having to work with commercial lenders, and do it without T4 income.
Yeah. And now when I asked you as well about your success in investing, you're very much talking like a commercial investor, because your responses were, this is my cash flow, this is my mortgage pay down, but you didn't once reference your equity growth you've experienced. I'm curious, what markets are you in? Because we're obviously across the GTA. Where are you getting $1,000 a month cash flow per unit? And what does the equity look like post-COVID for you?
Yeah. So, so $1,000 per property is kind of my mindset. So like two to four unit buildings, $1,000. If I'm getting a sixplex, it's got to be more. That's kind of a little mental, game that I use in my head. But yeah, I mean, London, Ontario, I invest everything solely in London, Ontario at this point. I'm investing in definitely transitioning neighborhoods, but at this point, luckily enough, it's transitioned, I think, like pretty significantly. So Old East Village is one of the neighborhoods I like in London. And when I was first investing in it, there was a lot of questions about whether that was a good neighborhood to invest in. Now I think people get it. They're like, okay, it's a great neighborhood. Maybe not everyone wants to live there themselves. I actually live in Old East Village myself, but it's not suburbia. It's an old neighborhood. It still has some people kind of wandering in, going through, your recycling, that kind of stuff. It's near downtown, right? Anything near downtown, you're going to be dealing with that kind of thing. But those are the types of neighborhood that you're probably going to have to invest in order to get, cash flow like that. But yeah, I mean, yeah, sorry, I forget the original question.
Yeah, no, well, you kind of answered it with the fact that you're in London, which tells me you're
Yeah,
very specialized, right? You know
yeah.
London really well. In fact, it's your backyard. So that's cool.
And that's actually a big part of how like a lot of my off-market deals come. I mean, like 70-80% of my portfolio has been off-market deals. And that's just because I'm living in the neighborhood that I love to invest in. So I'm always talking to people, I'm always calling rental ads and getting in touch with landlords. And I have like endless contacts in my phone, just always trying to stay in touch with people, trying to stay top of mind, providing them value so that they have a reason to remember who I am. Yeah, I think like I think being focused on a specific neighborhood, whether you live there or not, or being focused on at least a very specific market, really has a lot of value. I think, people don't remember that like focus is all about avoiding distraction. That's what focus is. And if people are constantly looking at social media and seeing Airbnb and re-rentals and investing in Windsor and like all these other cities and all these like strategies, great. Like you can make money in all of these. Pick what you think works well for you and focus on that and double down on that, because you're going to have the patience when opportunities aren't there, and you're going to have the urgency when the property that comes up is a good opportunity for you. You'll know how to jump on it quickly because you can recognize it in an instant.
Yeah, Kellan, that's great, man. So like a couple big nuggets to take away. It's all about networking. It's about relationships. Just coming on a podcast like this, my understanding is you run your own podcast as well. You've run
Yeah.
Grassroots type networking events in the past, and now you're also in coaching. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that. What has that allowed you to do for you and your students?
Yeah. So like for a long time, Instagram is a big source of like people reaching out. So people had DMing me on Instagram, like asking a million questions, and I was always helping them as much as I can. But like, I want to get invested in people's actual story, right? Like no one can give good advice unless they can tailor it to someone's one individual one-on-one, situation. So that was a big thing. I didn't feel like I was invested in people, and I really wanted to be able to understand exactly what was going on in their lives, in their relationship, in their what their capital situation is, like what their income situation is, all of this, take it all into account. Reverse engineer their goals, kind of say like, why are you buying what you're buying? Like help figure out their why, and then kind of reverse engineer the process from there. So, I mean, now, I've been taking on some full-time students. I was doing one-on-one coaching calls and stuff like that. That was helpful because I had an hour with people, but then I realized that's not enough either. So now I'm doing like 6 and 12 month coaching, coaching and mentorship packages or program. And I'm really enjoying it because first off, the people that reach out, they tend to resonate with me, which is nice because I mean, that's how social media works, right? Your audience finds you. You don't try and find your audience. So the people reaching out to me, we tend to resonate well. They tend to, we tend to get along well. They tend to think similarly. So I love being able to get invested in their story now and kind of help them reach financial independence as well. I think a lot of people reaching out, they have a lot of that sense of urgency that I had when I was getting into it, because they know, I did it in 2.5 years. They don't want to take 10 plus, 20 years to do this kind of thing. So they want to figure out how to keep up that momentum of their purchasing power. And a lot of people are trying to figure out how to do it without joint venture partners as well, so that they don't have to do twice as many deals to get a similar result.
Yeah. And the joint venture, it has its place, right? It's when you want to focus on either bringing the money or doing the managing side and not the other. Whereas doing it all as a package deal is very much in line with what you guys are accomplishing. So let's say you've got someone that's interested in doing this, no JV, I want to get my feet wet. And that's the other side of it too, is a lot of people might jump too quickly into a joint venture and they have no idea what that even entails. So what would you teach to people who want to grow? They want to do what you're doing, like these students, as you're onboarding them, what are some of the things that are critical for them as they start out?
Yeah. So identifying your strategy and identifying your market, and then laser focusing on that is, I think, the most important thing. Like I mentioned earlier, people are always jumping around between all different types of strategies. That's one of the first things that I try and identify for people. Are you just getting bombarded with these different things and then not like just trying a piece of this here and a piece of this there, and now I have to learn all about how to manage an Airbnb and then all about long-term rentals, and like laser focusing on a market or two and a strategy. And that's one of the first things that I think like it's really important for people to kind of like ingrain in their heads, is that idea of focus. And then from there, like I said, making sure that once they recognize the opportunities that come up, they jump on them immediately. They have someone there by their side to help them, identify how to get that property under contract, how to, plan strategic renovations. Maybe they're doing a purchase plus improvements and they need a quote the same day because they need to give it to their lender like right away. Like that sense of urgency and having someone there for them along the way really helps, I find. And then understanding that the properties like first off, how to filter for properties at a very high level so that they're not spending 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour every time a property pops up on the MLS and then eventually figuring out it's not for them. They can kind of figure out the value of their time a lot quicker when they can have a first filter in terms of how they identify if a property has potential. So those are just some of the things that like I find they can move a lot faster if they identify the value of their time early, get a really specific focus on strategy in a market, and then get good cash flowing properties that the bank will recognize, so that they continue buying without having to bring on partners if they don't want to.
Yeah. And to anyone that sits back and says, you're an investor, you don't do anything, you just collect passive income. Nowhere in there did we talk about passive income. It's very much an active approach. You got to attack this thing, and you got to have, like any business, a hyper focus. And I love that. I love that insight. So nowadays it's hard for young people. You and I are relatively young, I guess you could say.
Yeah, we're both 30, I guess.
So for young people today, there's a lot of challenges. Affordability in the market is one of the biggest talking points, is shortage of supply. And it doesn't even just limit itself downtown. It's even now stretched into a lot of the 905, the GTHA areas. What are some pieces of advice you'd give to young people that are maybe like they've got a little bit of money, or maybe they don't have a lot of money at all and they want to get into it? And it doesn't even need to limit to young people. This could happen at any stage. It's really just that first investment. Like what is something that you can do? What is the strategy maybe you've seen for you and your students on how to be successful?
Yeah, honestly, the first property I ever bought, the duplex, I did it with 5% down. I really like that strategy. I think that's something that I think everyone should take advantage of early on, especially if it's a property that doesn't require a ton of work, because that way you can actually, like, rarely in the future can you justify buying turnkey investment properties. But the first property with 5% down, it can be turnkey because you're getting really good leverage on that property. You don't necessarily need to do a big refinance. So that's a great opportunity to get in easily into a property that doesn't require a lot of work, allows you to maybe live in one half, live for free. That really helps your debt service ratios as well, because you don't have a principal residence. That payment just is seen as a liability, like as in rich dad, poor dad's eyes. And they're going to see, that's just reducing your income every month. There's no income associated with that property. So I really think that the ideal strategy for a lot of people starting out, buying either a 2 to 4 unit building, living in one of those units, doing that with 5 to 10% down, and utilizing a purchase plus improvement strategy. I think those three things are like one of the best ways to start out for a lot of people. And I mean, I didn't take advantage of the purchase plus improvements on my first one, but I did house hack, living in one unit, and then put 5% down. But I think that those 2 or 3 strategies, if you can use all of those in your first deal, you're getting some serious momentum really early on.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad you said house hacking. That if someone wants to look into that, that's where you do it. So just YouTube house hacking and see. And I actually did do it on the first place I lived on. I lived in the basement.
Nice.
I was living for under $500 a month. It needed some improvements, and bam, let's go. I put 10%
Yeah.
down. So that strategy,
Yeah.
it works. You know, it really does.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's
So
incredible.
any other tips that you would give maybe someone that's seasoned down the line as they've kind of gone, maybe they've got that one property, they've got a couple properties, and they want to start to scale that. What would be that? What's the key to getting to that next level to build to the double digit type of properties?
Yeah. So one of the things that like an early mentor of mine really drilled home in my head was, you want to make sure you're getting money out of every deal. So you want to keep up purchasing momentum. You can't just buy a property, put 80 grand down, and then just save for the next one. Like you need to be getting money out of a deal.
Yeah.
A lot of people, the main strategy is going to be BRRRRing. They're going to be trying to add a lot of value and refinance out the capital and use that. But you can also do it through the purchase plus improvements mortgage. You can do it through some other like vendor takebacks. Maybe they'll allow you to do 5% down. Maybe you could do interest only mortgage payments. There's a variety of different creative ways that you can get money out of deals. But I think early on, especially, that's super important. And then once you get, to 10 plus properties, there's a good chance that there's at least one of those at any time that you can refinance some capital out of. So at some point along the lines, especially if you have full control over that portfolio and you don't need to run to ask anyone questions, you can just go and refinance it. You're always going to have momentum built into your portfolio at that point. So for myself, there's always one property I can grab the capital out of, the equity that's built up through mortgage paydown and appreciation, and buy the next one. And I mean, I don't at this point necessarily need to buy value add properties. And momentum is kind of baked in. But early on, very important that you keep up momentum by getting money out of every deal, however you can.
Awesome. Kellan, I'm so excited to see the success that you get. Maybe let us know, where can people reach you if they want to learn a little bit more about your coaching or just follow your content online?
Yeah, so Instagram is probably the best place. So it's Kellan.James on Instagram. And yeah, my website's kellanjames.ca. And then I have a YouTube channel as well that I'm not super active on right now, but there's some good videos on there. I did a video on how to find off-market deals, how I screen tenants, and some BRRRR properties I've done. So feel free to check out any of those. Instagram's probably the main one though.
Awesome. Thanks again, Kellan, and have a great day.
Thank you. Appreciate it.